This is Daniel Gaffone for Eat, Sleep, Boxing Repeat in Liverpool for the Wasserman Boxing Show live on Channel 5. It's a pleasure to be joined by Mr. Wasserman himself, Kalle Sauerland. Kalle, first of all, how's Liverpool treating you? Enjoying fight week so far?
Very nice, Danny. It's always a pleasure to be in Liverpool, especially when there's boxing. Live on Channel 5, Friday night, 9 p.m. So not only have we got boxing on free to air, but we've also got an hour where hopefully also families will be watching. We'll get new audiences in. So 9 p.m. Friday night, live on Channel 5 from the M&S Arena in Liverpool. And we got the big man back, Nathan Gorman. You know, I think one of the future contenders to take over from the Tyson Furies, the Anthony Joshuas of this world. Here's a big fight, main event, international IBF championship. People who don't know about boxing, well, that's the belt that gets you in the top 15 of the world. Simple, right? So it's a big night for Nathan. He's been out 15 months. He's got a very tough opponent, Salek. He certainly looked the part here today at the weigh-in and at the press conference yesterday. You know, he's got a strong record, 17-3, and you know, it's for a 15-month layoff. A lot of fighters would have maybe gone a different path. Nathan wanted in at this level, and we're very excited. And at the same time, we've got Josh Kalle, also one of the most talked about prospects in British boxing, massively built up by Sky. You know, he obviously had that loss with Avanesian, sort of gave him a bump on the road, but he's been working very, very hard. Amazingly dedicated kid, and one of the, as everyone, all the so-called experts said, one of the biggest talents in British boxing. So can't wait to see him back tomorrow night as well.
I feel like I've got no more questions anymore, mate. Just back to Nathan Gorman.
I'm going to ask my own questions, aren't I? Sort of make them up as I go along.
But just to touch on Nathan Gorman briefly, as you mentioned there, could have got away with a softer touch. You know, Thomas Salek coming in there, as you say, good record, 7-3, bit of power. What's the plan going forward with Nathan? You mentioned there you see him as contending future at world level. He obviously fell short a couple of years back against Daniel Dubois for the British. Would you like to see him maybe conquer the British scene first and then push on to that potential you see he has at world level?
The nice thing about the British scene compared to other national scenes, it actually has a logic to it. You know, the British title is one of those belts that it's a very clean, pure belt. You know what you get. Yeah, you know, win a British title and you know you're doing well. Yeah. It's a great stepping stone. What I'd say is, people talk about the fight with Dubois. He was 22 or 23 at the time. He's 25 now. Right? I mean, we're talking about a puppy here. You know, heavyweights generally, don't think about the Tysons who, you know, win world type championships, they're 18, 19 years old. Those come along once in 100 years. You're talking about a man who's 25 years old. He's come in very light, I've got to say, for this fight. Especially for a heavyweight coming off such a layoff. So he's clearly really wants to impress. He wants to be fast in there tomorrow night. I do genuinely believe he's from big fighting family, 300 years of fighting experience in the family. 300, not 3 years, 300 years of fighting experience in the family. You know, looks a bit like young Tyson Fury. Happens to be his cousin as well, and he's someone I believe can go all the way, absolutely.
And co-main, as you mentioned, Josh Kalle finally making his Wasserman debut. Must be just a relief at this stage after the whole rigmarole went on at your last show, just to finally see Josh Kalle live on Channel 5.
I mean, it feels for us like, oh well, who cares, it's only 4 weeks later. But Josh had to make weight for that fight, keep the weight, and keep it that weight going into this fight. That's tough. That's even tougher on the back of an 18-month layoff. So credit to Josh. I think there's going to be some spite in those punches tomorrow night. I think he'll feel like he's fighting two people. He'll be thinking about the last opponent and the opponent tomorrow night. So look, he's got an experienced guy in Peter Kramer. He's someone that he should be strong enough to show us that Josh been learning stuff, but at the same time, he should also be the sort of opponent where he can make a statement with. But he's also the sort of opponent with that experience he brings in that can easily be a banana skin when you've been out 18 months. So it gives us a bit of intrigue.
Just back to the weight, Josh obviously when he was with Sky and Matchroom campaigned mostly at welterweight. There was always a feeling he was very big at that weight and would move up. Do you see his future very much at 154?
Well, I don't know, I just look at the scales in my life, and we generally don't get lighter, do we, in the years? Apart from Anita Donaire, who seems to have gone backwards in weights. I don't know many fighters who go through weights downwards. So yeah, I mean, I think super welter is the weight where he looks like he's comfortable at. I mean, he was bang on today, and he's really worked hard with Adam, not just on weight. I think he's worked hard on his skill set as well, and I think there's a lot of fine tuning that they want to put into place, and in a way the 18-month layoff, don't want to speak too earlier, but I think it will later in his career he'll look back and say, wow, actually that worked quite well for me. Obviously changed promoters in that time, changed a little bit the setup, and he's in a good place.
Super welter, obviously a division that's absolutely popping both domestically and internationally. You're bound to be licking your lips at some of the potential matchups that can be made with Josh Kalle. Not going to press you for a name or anything, but do you think we could see Josh in a real sort of big fight again, hopefully free to air on Channel 5 towards the end of the year?
Yeah, absolutely. No, Josh will be back at least a couple of times this year. There's so many. I mean, the Ritson one's the obvious one that pops out from a national point of interest, because you've got that sort of Newcastle, Sunderland angle to it, but at the same time, you said it yourself, there's probably 6-7 fights where people will say, let's tear up, we'd watch.
So it's the second Wasserman show and they'll be broadcast live in Channel 5. The sort of whole main advantage of that is the eyeballs that these fighters have been exposed. Do you think with who we're seeing in the card, in particular, you've got big heavyweight Nathan Gorman, you've got an incredibly entertaining, skillful fighter in Josh Kalle, is the sort of hope that with the sort of enhanced eyes that'll be seen on them in Channel 5, is that's going to help progress these lads on to huge stars in the future?
I think you just have a look at the fighters who've fought on Channel 5 in the past. We're the promoters of Chris Eubank Jr. He's fought on Channel 5. Tyson Fury, Huey Fury, lots of loads of great names. The only thing is, what we're trying to bring is consistency to it, and to bring it on a regular basis. So we're announcing a card next month again. Probably have a break in August, and we'll be going September, October, November, live on free-to-air television, and that's the way you build it up. It's something we've done in other countries before, and we kicked off Smash Records with 1 million viewers, with a great fight with Denzel Bentley and Linus Adofia, but for them both of them, it was the first time they ever headlined a show, let alone headline a show. At the O2 on live on Channel 5, so it was a baptism of fire, but hey, it paid off, didn't it? Because that fight normally would have ended up 60,000-70,000 viewers somewhere. We absolutely tore it up, and for both of them, and I don't even promote Denzel Bentley, it was an advert for the sport. It was an advert for both of them. Denzel just nicked it, but Linus didn't come away from the fight with a lesser reputation. They were both warriors on the night, and the difference is they were rewarded with that, with 1 million people watching it. That's a good feeling as a fighter.
The Bentley-Adofia fight was certainly one of the best fights I've seen in free-to-air TV for a long, long time. But I hope it is a trend we can see continue. Just briefly, a couple of other fighters you're involved with, Kalle. You mentioned there Chris Eubank Jr. There was a sort of saga with the Kell Brook fight. Well, it won't happen. Kell Brook's retired. We've since seen a few rumbles about Liam Smith as a potential opponent. Can you give us an update? Not necessarily a confirmation on who he's going to fight, but when we can expect to see Chris back in the ring?
I expect him back, like I've said all along, sort of late summer, September. That's the target, and that's what will happen. The opponents, you're right, I'm not going to comment too much on them, because when you negotiate, you try and keep it down. Yeah, you might try and sell a fight here and there, but you've said a name that's interesting there. There's a few others as well, and we're getting closer. I think 2-3 weeks time.
Another name sort of tipped as a fight with Chris, the Kazakh fighter Zhannabek. I'll not insult him by trying to pronounce his surname. Now, he recently picked up the WBO interim title against Danny Dignam. Now, that's a fight that, whilst it may be for a belt, it wouldn't have the same sort of commercial drive as a fight with Liam Smith, certainly in these shores anyway. Do you think Chris is more looking at a big money fight with not necessarily the world title shot, or if a world title shot came up for less money, do you think there's a chance he'll prioritise that?
Well, I've got to deal with Chris, and then I've got to go out and make the big fights, and hopefully the big fights involve a belt. I don't think an interim belt against the gentleman you just mentioned, Zhannabek, is a fight that Chris has been pining for. Let's remember, Chris Eubank Jr. has been in the ring with James DeGale, Billy Joe Saunders, Liam Williams. George Groves, of course, he's been in there with some very, very big names. Lost some 1-1, but always been fantastic fights, and that's what you want to see. With all due respect to the gentleman, if it was a full belt, maybe look at it a bit longer. But for right now, we're looking more at big fights.
Just the last one for me, Kalle, I'll let you go.
Andrade's name floated as well. It's a weird situation, that BO, because Andrade's still the champ. Then I heard he gave it up to fight a guy called Zach Parker. Then it was called off. Now Andrade must be back at 160, fighting the Kazakh. So how could we fight the Kazakh if he's got to fight Andrade? Then I've heard us link with Andrade, but how can that be? Because Andrade has to fight the Kazakh. So there's lots of things that I think will come out of that BO situation, but it's not one we're waiting for.
The middleweight division in general has been a bit sort of stagnant in terms of fights for the last couple of years, so I do sympathise.
Yeah, and that's why we look at even look at catchweight fights like we did with the Brooks situation. To make big fights, you need to sometimes do that, and the one thing I'd say about Junior is he don't really care where or who he fights. He just wants big fights, he always says. And I've worked with him now on and off since 2017. One of the easiest guys. You hear, you see all the his lifestyle on Instagram and all that, and I think a lot of it is tongue in cheek as well. And people misinterpret him for being arrogant, but he's not. He's just a very serious guy who takes his sport really serious. But the details, in terms of who he's fighting, he's actually one of the easiest going fighters you'll ever meet. He will never turn around and say, "No, I'm not fighting him." Never not fighting him. So I'll never understand that Golovkin's story at the time. There's so many different versions of it, but he will fight anyone who's put in front of him.
Chris has got a broadcaster agreement with Sky. I remember you've expressed a bit of frustration at Sky. And
Chris doesn't. We have an agreement with Sky for certain shows.
Sorry, my mistake. You have an agreement with Sky, but I remember around the negotiations, the Brook fight, you expressed a bit of frustration, felt that maybe Boxer were sort of, I think the term you used was dicking about. Is that relationship with Sky still, and Boxer still all cushy?
But it's one. We've got to find the opportunities for Chris. And we look at what we can put on Sky box office. That's what it must be, and that's of course a challenge. Or else we would have announced a fight already by now, wouldn't we? But we try and be creative with them and see where that leads us.
Just one last thing I'd like to get your opinion on. Tyson Fury, we saw the other night, maybe not to the surprise of some people, maybe hinted he might not be retired. Did that come as any shock to you that we're going to see Fury in the ring again potentially?
You clearly haven't seen many interviews of mine recently. No, I've said from day one, I said, no, listen. I said, Tyson does this after every fight. I don't blame him. He's a showman. That's his thing. And by the way, so did Muhammad Ali, and so did all the great fighters in the past. So there's no disrespect to Tyson for that. I think he trains so hard for these fights. He feels like after every fight, that's it. I've nothing in the tank left. And can you blame him after that fight with Wilder? I didn't even want to see the second fight. The third fight. For me, it was game over after the second fight. For me, he won the first fight. Second fight, he destroyed him, and I wasn't interested. Like most fans, we wanted to see the Joshua fight, and then we got this Wilder fight, and Tyson had that layoff, and you can see yeah, he'll admit he wasn't at his best, but he created a night of entertainment that you normally get out of Hollywood films. So he must have felt super spent after that. I mean, he still managed to somehow sing to an arena. Then he goes off, and then he fights Dillian Whyte with a much shorter break. And then you see Tyson, when he's active and he's regular, how much better he is. Of course, the Wilder fight had all the, the knockdowns, the standouts, but you don't want knockdowns in fighters; they happen. But for Tyson, it was like okay, he's knocked me down, stood up, shook it off, and came back in. It was like a throwback. And then you watch the Whyte fight, and you couldn't really give Whyte around, and he took care of him with an uppercut from the gods. So it was. He needs to, in my opinion, he needs to stay active. At the same time, he's at the time of his career where he wants to earn a lot of money. It's professional boxing, it's not charity. But at the same time, I think he's enjoying life, and I would be.
You and me both.
I mean, Tyson has not come through the easy way. He hasn't, he didn't win a gold medal. He hasn't been, been looked after from day one. He's had it the hard way, and I think people have to remember that. He's had it very, very tough coming through, if he wants to retire, he deserves it, but he ain't retiring.
I don't think so either. Kalle,
he won't retire, not yet, not a chance.
Kalle Sauerland, thanks very much. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, Danny.